Welcome to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast, your daily dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. Guys, it's President's Day, but I'm not calling it President's Day. All right, I can't stand that generic term. It is George Washington Day. It is Abraham Lincoln Day. It is not President's Day. I'm sorry. A lot of other presidents, most other presidents, as a matter of fact, don't deserve the same credit that George Washington and Abraham Lincoln do. One, for establishing the Constitution of the United States of America and abiding by it in George Washington, and another, Abraham Lincoln, and saving the Union. As great as other presidents may be that came after those two or even between them, none will ever be as great as them, because without them, there would be no United States of America. It's plain and simple. That is absolutely clear. There's so much that I want to get to today in the broadcast. We will talk about that. I'm going to do something I don't necessarily like doing, but I do want to read a quick summary from the History Channel about these two presidents and give you a comparison and why I believe that they are worthy to be praised and no other presidents of the United States. And listen, guys, I say this as a person that loves Reagan, a person that loves Trump, a person that loved Calvin Coolidge. When I read back on the history of his administration and Teddy Roosevelt, even some things I didn't like about Teddy Roosevelt, frankly, but nonetheless, these were great men. These were great presidents. None of them deserve the accolades that George Washington and Abraham Lincoln do. None at all. It's not even close. I know people want to say that. I hear a lot of people say Trump is the greatest president ever. I'm sorry. I love Trump. That's nonsense. Reagan, love Reagan. That's nonsense. All right. It's George Washington and his Abraham Lincoln. Let's not get it twisted. You have to put yourself in the context of history. So it's easy to say that Reagan or Trump are the best presidents in modern day America. But to go back and say they're as great as a George Washington and Abraham Lincoln when the country was just getting started and when we were in the midst of a civil war is absolutely insane. I'm sorry. All right, so we got that to get to. Also, we got the truckers, basically that are facing off against New York State and New York City. So, as you may know, Trump was forced to pay $355 million, or ordered to pay $355 million. He calls the decision a sham. This was by the left-wing Judge Erdogan, or whatever his name is, in New York. We will get to that and why that is such a bad decision. I don't even think Democrats or liberals, even like the judge or Letitia James, the AG out there, understands that the damage that they've just inflicted on New York City. Guys, I know you've heard this said plenty of times before. You don't have to live in New York City. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand this. If you think New York City is bad now, you better wait a minute, because it's going to get a lot worse after this judgment. You can bet your bottom dollar on that. All right. Also, what do we got? You have the squad member, and actually just anti-Semite. Let's just call her what she is. She's an anti-Jew hater. All right. She's a Jew hater. All right, not an anti-Jew. She's a Jew hater, and that's Squad Representative Rashaida Tlaib. She's urging primary voters to snub Joe Biden over his support of Israel, so we'll get into that. Harvard professor does a study on police shootings. It's Roland Fryer. I actually talked about this years ago, literally when the study came out. I remember reading, if I recall correctly, Heather McDonald. I remember reading Roland Fryer. I remember reading articles from Larry Elder on that very subject years ago. And so we'll touch on it because it's making news again, because he came out and he did an interview, I believe, with the Free Press, speaking of or detailing what was going on during that period of time. I mean, to be a fair professor that had his work based upon research, and then literally going from the point where he just says, all right, there's no racial bias, appears to be no racial bias when it comes to police shooting based upon extensive research. And then before you know it, he has to get armed guards for protection. He's a black liberal. And he wanted to believe the worst of cops, but the research, scientific, thorough research, and he doubled down on the research. Not only did he arrive at the conclusions based upon research that he studied, he had another team of college students dig down into the research as well to make sure that he wasn't lying or off about it, because he didn't want to be proved wrong, but he was proved wrong. All right. And so there is no racial bias when it comes to policing and blacks. All right. So we'll get into that. Also, Joy Reid. What did Joy Reid said? Joy Reid, basically what she deserves reparations or something of the sort for, says that she literally physically built this country and is infuriated that she has not received money for it yet. Do you guys know that Joy Reid has no connection to slavery whatsoever, American slavery? We'll get into that. Just absolute nonsense. Man, I got so much to get into. It's absolutely insane. So Joy Reid, Roland Fryer, and Coulter sounds off on the Bill Maher show about this the Kansas City parade shooting as the KC Chiefs were celebrating their Super Bowl victory, and they're not releasing the names or pictures of the shooters, and they're blaming age, but these shooters are going to be these murderers, in at least they killed one woman at least, are not apparently are going to be charged as adults, but they're not showing their pictures. And so her argument is that they're probably not showing their pictures because they're black or some type of minority. Guarantee you she's right. Whenever the narrative does not fit the left's narrative, they will not show pictures. So we'll sound off on that, and then we'll start. But first, I want to start with the truckers. So let's go there. And I got more news. Oh, Governor Greg Abbott wants to build a military base near the border. So we'll sound off on that too. So let's go ahead and roll the video. This is the first video. Again, this is a breaking news. This video popped up this morning, but no loads to New York City. It isn't just truckers participating in the boycott, right, in New York City. And again, former President Donald Trump was he was forced, or he is going to be forced, I guess, to pay. He's going to appeal it, no doubt about it. But the radical Judge Erdogan in New York City, with the help of Letitia James, has ordered President Trump to pay $355 million. Let me just give you the background. This hat tip to National Review. So Manhattan Judge Arthur Engoron ordered Trump and his companies to pay $355 million in penalties in a Friday ruling in the former president's civil fraud trial. And place severe restrictions on the real estate mogul's ability to do business in New York. So Trump's adult sons, both Donald Jr. and Eric Trump, each must pay $4 million each, in addition to the $355 million that their father is being ordered to pay as part of the ruling. The Trump Organization, his company, is banned from loans in New York for the next 3 years. So in that same period, Trump himself is banned from serving as the officer or director of any New York corporation or other legal entity in New York. You know, obviously his companies. I mean, this is absolutely insane. So the man is charged $355 million for doing something that all real estate developers do. All real estate developers do this. It's insane. But we're going to play these videos for you because I don't think New York understands the pain that they're about to experience. Never mind the violence, the increased violence, thanks to left-wing radicals taking over the state, both in the governor's mansion and also the New York City mayor. The illegal immigration, they absolutely have no way to curtail it, despite the fact that they call themselves a sanctuary city. The crime is absolutely out of control. We'll get into that. And now this. They've just told business owners, they've just told developers, you're not welcome here. If you don't think like us, we will figure out a way to punish you if we don't like how you think. You realize how dangerous this is. You think this may be, it may just be a Trump thing. They won't do this to Democrats. You know, they won't do, yes, they will do this to Democrats. If Democrats don't like another Democrat, they'll do this to another Democrat. Business owners in New York City, you better get out of that city. And don't you come to my state. Don't you come to my state. Don't you come to my city and vote for Democrats. Don't you do it. Don't you destroy the state of Florida. All right. But I would encourage you to leave. Maybe go to New Jersey if you're a liberal. All right. Don't come to Florida if you're a liberal. We don't want your freaking policies. You guys destroy your states. You come to states like ours and you do the same crap. I don't want that stuff. All right. Anyway. Let's get into these videos. Let's go ahead and roll them. Por favor, gay.
All right. I just received a call from a company that I was getting a load from, and they just said they don't have any loads going to New York. So if you're in New York, you won't be receiving anything from on these drivers. I don't know if it's real, but I know that the companies are now saying that they're not delivering loads. It's not just the truckers, it's the companies also. Get yourself prepared, New York. Shit may hit the fan in the next couple of days.
All right, so there it is. That is a driver. And guys, let's be real. Listening to that driver, does he sound white? Does he sound Latino? No, he sounds black. Here's what you need to know. The vast majority of truckers are extremely educated when it comes to politics because they spend so much time on the road. They get to listen to a plethora of shows, political shows and other shows that express different points of view. So they're well informed on many of these issues, and they're not standing for this. They realize how important their jobs are. They make the economy run. They are the oil that makes this economy run. And it's a disaster. This could be an absolute disaster. I want you guys to look at this and listen to this next video. This is a trucker himself. But before we go to this, before we play this, I just want to highlight a couple of things that the other trucker said in the video. Notice he said that it isn't just the truckers anymore. It's companies. Now there's companies on board that are saying, screw it. We're not going to deliver to New York City. Guys, it's not about how you feel about Trump. What you shouldn't have is a judge and an AG saying, listen, when there was no crime, the banks literally testified in favor of Trump, saying, wait, nothing to see here. He overvaluated his properties. So we come in, they do an appraisal, and they say, nope, we're willing to pay this much for him. And that's what they have to go by. Every real estate developer does that because they want to get more money. They want to get the most money for their buck. As a matter of fact, you as a home buyer or as a home seller, you do that. You make little repairs to your home and then you try to market it or sell it for top dollar. Who wouldn't do that? And then the bank comes in or property appraiser comes in and say, sorry, it's only worth this much. Or you're buying a house and someone says it's worth this much. And then you go walk the house with your real estate agent and you're like, well, this has to be done. This has to be done. This has to be done. Negotiate for me. Guys, this is insane. There's nothing criminal about this. This is a guy, this judge valued Mar-a-Lago at $18 million. That thing is worth $500 million. There are lots in the area that Mar-a-Lago, lots with nothing built on them, going for as much as $150 million. And this fool values Mar-a-Lago, the entire property and the building itself, for $18 million. You have to be on crack to do that. You have to have a mind that doesn't understand anything beyond third grade math to come up with that. That's absolutely insane. All right, so let's go ahead and roll this video, por favor. This is another trucker that's talking about the boycott and the impact that it is going to have on New York City. And I hope to God that he's right. Guys, listen, if you love America and you're not a left-wing kook, I encourage you to get out of New York City. But again, don't you come to a red state and vote Democrat again. Understand who the Democrat Party is. This is a party full of communists. That is all they are. They are commies. They're commies by default, many of them, because many of them can't even see the big picture. Many of them don't even understand what's being done to their country. Let's play this video, Gabe.
Good morning, Patriots. This is Trucker Jake. There's talk of a trucker boycott of the city of New York to protest the persecution of President Trump. Now, liberals seem to think that this is a pretty funny idea. Let me tell you a quick story. A couple years ago, a Colorado trucker was involved in a terrible accident, loss of life. It was tragic. The Colorado judge sentenced that trucker to 110 years in prison. Now, you decide for yourself whether or not he deserved that prison sentence, but when truck drivers from around America heard about that sentence, they organized a boycott against the state of Colorado. And within a month, they brought the state of Colorado to its knees. That judge resentenced that trucker from 110 years to 10 years in prison. The point is, MAGA patriots make this country run. Liberals, they make our coffee. This is Trucker Jake. God bless President Trump. God bless MAGA America. God bless our truckers. Y'all have a blessed day.
All right, obviously that is not completely true, but it is a point well taken. And it is, I think, mostly true. Now, I could be proven wrong on that, but I think it's mostly true. Guys, let me tell you, I mean, just sitting here, think about it. Think of all these little snotty New York City liberals or LA liberals, these elites that think they're better than you. If you live in the Midwest or if you live in, podunk country or whatever, these people can't survive without you. Oh, they want to be vegan and they want to do this and they want to do that. Who does the farming? Who does the farming? They want to eat the best of meats. They want to drink the best of wines. Who does that? Who produces that? Who toils for their pleasure? These people can survive a week without regular, average, everyday Americans. These elites, these global elites, the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, these foods cannot survive without everyday men and women, Americans and people of different countries that know how to build stuff, that know how to create stuff, that know how to grow stuff. Technology will suck. Technology is just technology. If you can't use technology to ship something worth value, something that's tangible, you're worthless. You know what I'm saying? It's worthless. These people are just a bunch of morons that believe they are elite. So anyway, let me make sure that I want to share nothing else I want to share before I get into this. Okay, let's go ahead and get into this. I want to break something down. So this is Joy Reid. Now let me find something because I found out today. I did not know this. So you have Joy Reid, host of MSNBC, an elite. I don't know why she's wearing a Chris Matthews wig, but anyway, you have Joy Reid, host of MSNBC. I want to try to find this. I did not know this. Did you know that this chick has absolutely no ties whatsoever to American slavery? But she's sitting here talking about how she built this country, how her ancestors built this country. This lady does not, it saddens me and it makes me mad that they would have a racist bigot like this who does not deserve to be or to host a show like hers, to get paid buku money. This is a lady that only made it to Harvard based upon her skin color. She admitted on live air that she would not have made it without affirmative action. Guys, I'm sorry. When you have a bunch of white liberals bending over backwards to prove they're not racist and they're disqualifying qualified whites and Asians that should have filled Joy Reid's place at Harvard or whatever Ivy League institution she went to, you know the system is not systemically racist. When you have people like Joy Reid that get to sit and moan and whine about their positions or their plight in America when they're in the upper echelon of society, it proves that she's wrong and that founders like George Washington and and presidents like Abraham Lincoln were right about this country. She's wrong about this country. What a disgusting, this lady, she's a despicable human being. I don't say this lightly. I don't say this to just be hyperbolic. And I can't stand people that keep racial division going when it isn't necessary, where it doesn't exist. She's one of those people. She's doing it for money. I'm not even sure. I used to believe she believed everything that came out of her mouth because she's so cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I'm not sure if she does or if it's an act. Either way, she's sinning. This is another Fani Willis. Like Fani Willis put on that, that political theater last week in the courtroom. She wanted to be this angry black woman and come off of, what she wanted to do is endear black voters towards her so that her behind won't end up in jail. But if we have a justice system that's truly promoting justice, Fani Willis will go to jail. Anyway, having said that, let's go ahead and roll this video. This is MSNBC host Joy Reid, and I'm going to debunk this after this, by the way. So stay tuned for this and make sure you share this cut. I think Gabe is going to slice up some of these and put them on Instagram, YouTube. Make sure you share these with people that you know, because I'm here debunking the left. This is the greatest country that God has ever given man. America works. America principles work. You are blessed if you live in this country. I don't care about your skin color. You are blessed if you live in this country. Are you the one taking the trek across the globe, from around the globe, to become a United States citizen? I'm not even a big fan of Laura Loomer, but she had an excellent video where she traveled to, I believe, Panama, and she met with some Somalians that were there talking about their trek to get in to the United States and everything that they had done. They also mentioned that they loved Ilhan Omar, and they, as a representative, they liked Joe Biden. Of course they do. Of course they do. One of the guys said he wanted to be a politician, but he realized that America is a place to be because you can come from a country like Somalia, like Representative Ilhan Omar did, and you can become a congresswoman. So that's why he wants to come to the United States. She's an anti-Jew, but she's admired. Crazy times. All right, let's go ahead and roll. Joy Reid and her Chris Matthews wig.
And to find out that literally Barack Obama's 2 terms as president are your reparations, and Juneteenth, which you already celebrated anyway, is your reparations, and yet you built this country. You literally physically built this country, and yet the attitude toward you from a lot of your peers and your fellow citizens is just shut up and be grateful. And it's infuriating.
Yeah, Joy, shut up and be grateful. You didn't build this country. You didn't build it. This is insane. Fool, you don't even live in the times where the country was built. And you have no connection to American slavery. Her family is from Guyana, and oh man, I can't find it right now. Let's see. Her family is from Guyana, and I can't even find it right now. I just found this out this morning. But from 2 parts of Africa where slaves were not taken from. And by the way, sold off by other Africans, as a matter of fact. The lady is just a complete and utter, this is what you get. When you go to an Ivy League school, you get people like Joy Reid that believe this nonsense. I'm not trying to minimize the slight of slavery in America. It was evil. It was evil. But don't sit here and pretend like slavery didn't exist and still doesn't exist on every other part of the world. Slavery was always universal. And the great part about America, and even Europeans, for those of you that complain about European colonization, remember, it wasn't Europeans that started slavery. You can go and read the Bible and trace the history of slavery going way back since the beginning of the time. But it was Europeans that ended slavery, that ended the slave trade. I mean, this is insane. And then we have to work out our sins. And that's exactly what our Constitution allowed us to do. Let me also give you this, debunk this myth that slaves built the country. And again, I don't want to minimize slavery in America. But guys, let's just be honest. Let's use some common sense. If you had black slaves, black African slaves in America that were sold off by other Africans, do you think, let's just be honest, do you think the black slaves were the elite of the elites in Africa? Or were the black Africans that were selling them off, were they? See, Joy Reid can't think critically. That's why you got people like me here. Make sure you constantly tune in to the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you go to get your podcast. Guys, we're on YouTube, Rumble, Getter, True Social, wherever I am on social media, The Carl Jackson Show. And please review us if you are on YouTube and Rumble. I would certainly appreciate that. And subscribe to the podcast wherever you go to get your podcast, Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and Rumble. Don't forget to support our friends at MyPillow.com. MyPillow.com right now has got some fabulous deals available for you. All you have to do is go to mypillow.com, click on the radio podcast square at the top of the page. Guys, please enter my name, Carl. That is a C-A-R-L. All right. I don't spell it like the communists. C-A-R-L, or give them a call at 800-858-0263. Again, that number, 800-858-0263 is a number to call in and use my name, Carl, C-A-R-L, and you've got all types of deals that are available to you. Each product comes with a 10-year warranty and a 60-day money-back guarantee, so you cannot beat that with a bat. All right, so now let me debunk what you just heard from Joy Reid, this wearing this Chris Matthews wig. All right, so hat tip to Michael Medved, historian. 6 inconvenient truths about the U.S. and slavery. Number 4, it is not true. And you can read this in history books. I got a book now that I'm reading through called Not Stolen by Jim Finn Paul, I believe is the name. All right, forgive me. All right. So anyway, I interviewed him, and I forget his name, but I know it's Finn Paul. All right. Number 4, it's not true that the U.S. became a wealthy nation through the abuse of slave labor. The most prosperous states in the country were those that first freed their slaves. So Pennsylvania passed an emancipation law in 1780. All right. Connecticut and Rhode Island followed 4 years later, all before the Constitution. New York approved emancipation in 1799. These states, he writes, with dynamic centers in Philadelphia and Manhattan, quickly emerged as robust centers of commerce and manufacturing, greatly enriching themselves while the slave-based economies in the South languished by comparison. Guys, when I first moved from Los Angeles to Florida, you know, I got to say this. I'm not trying to be mean, but it's true. You can see how, frankly, just how far behind many minorities seem to be educationally. I mean, that has completely changed now. Yeah, I moved here 20 plus years ago. That has completely changed. But you could see the effects. I mean, you really could. It was insane, and lots of baby mamas, lots of families that weren't together. Stuff that, frankly, believe it or not, I didn't always see or didn't seem to be as rampant in California at the time. I mean, it was just absolutely crazy. This notion that slaves built the country, it's just nonsense. Obviously, they were an important part of the economy, sadly, due to the cotton industry, but the cotton gin slowed that down even. But it was still just horrible. A lot of these, Democrats in the South that own these plantations, that is the work. They thrived off of slavery. And they did everything they could to keep slavery going. So don't let anyone tell you that the Civil War was not about slavery. Of course it was. Well, it was about industry. Well, what industry? Give me a freaking break. All right. So that's insane. What's important is that America ended slavery. We ended it. The Brits ended the slave trade, ended the shipping. Go and watch the story of William Wilberforce, the movie. It's absolutely phenomenal, and it's pretty accurate historically. All right, so these states with, again, dynamic banking centers in Philadelphia and Manhattan quickly emerged as robust centers of commerce and manufacturing, greatly enriching themselves, while the slave-based economies in the South languished by comparison. At the time of the Constitution, Virginia constituted the most populous and wealthiest state, all right, in the Union, but by the time of the war between the states and the Old Dominion had fallen, far behind a half dozen northern states that had outlawed slavery 2 generations earlier. All analysis of Northern victory in the Great Sectional Struggle highlights the vast advantages in terms of wealth and productivity in New England and the mid-Atlantic states, the Midwest, compared to the relatively backward and impoverished states of the Confederacy. While a few elite families in the Old South undoubtedly based their formidable fortunes on the labor of slaves, all right, a few elite families. The prevailing reality of the planter class involved chronic indebtedness and shaky finances long before the ultimate collapse of the evil system of bondage. Medved writes, the notion that America based its wealth and development on slave labor hardly comports with the obvious reality that for 200 years since the founding of the Republic, by far the poorest and least developed section of the nation was precisely the region where slavery once prevailed. He said it so much better than I could. I still saw the consequences of slavery when I moved to the South. It was, I'm sorry. So just common sense tells you they did not have the industry to build the United States of America. What about slave labor with Chinese people, Asians, working on railroads? Guys, this is just insane. What about the Industrial Revolution? See, Joy Reid is uninformed, and so sadly, she's creating an army of uninformed minions. All right, so moving on from that, let's go to the next video. This is the video of Roland Fryer. Oh, okay. I thought he was a former professor of economics at Harvard University. Apparently, he is still a professor, at least according to this, according to the Free Press of economics. He was the youngest, I believe, the youngest person ever. I don't think just black, but I believe the youngest person ever that was promoted to become a professor at Harvard. But this is Roland Fryer, Professor Roland Fryer, talking about the data that he collected, that he accumulated when it comes to racial bias in shooting, and he discovered, to his chagrin at the time, that it didn't exist. This is Roland Fryer. Let's go ahead and roll it. Por favor, Gabe.
I collected a lot of data. We collected millions of observations on everyday use of force that wasn't lethal. We collected thousands of observations on lethal force. And it was in this moment in 2016 that I realized people lose their minds when they don't like the result. So what my paper showed, you'll see tomorrow, like some of you, was that, yes, we saw some bias in the low-level uses of force, every day pushing up against cars and things like that. People seem to like that result. But we didn't find any racial bias in police shootings. Now, that was really surprising to me because I expected to see it. The little-known fact is I had 8 full-time RAs that it took to do this over nearly a year. When I found this surprising result, I hired 8 fresh ones and redid it to make sure. They came up with the same exact answer, and I thought it was robust. And then I went to go give it, and my God, all hell broke loose. It was a 104-page, dense academic economics paper with a 150-page appendix, okay? It was posted for 4 minutes when I got my first email. This is full of shit. Doesn't make any sense. And I wrote back, how'd you read it that fast? That's amazing. You are a genius. And I had colleagues take me to the side and say, don't publish this. You'll ruin your career. I said, what are you talking about? I said, what's wrong with it? Do you believe the first part? Yes. Do you believe the second part? Well, the issue is they just don't fit together. We like the first one, but you should publish the second one another time. I said, let me ask this. If the second part about the police shootings, this is a literal conversation. I said to them, if the second part showed bias, do you think I should publish it then? And they said, yeah, then it would make sense. And I said, I guarantee you I'll publish it. We'll see what happens. So it was, you know, I lived under police protection for about 30 or 40 days. I had a 7-day-old daughter at the time. I remember going and shopping for it because, you know, when you have a newborn, you think you have enough diapers, you don't. So I was going to the grocery store to get diapers with an armed guard. It was crazy. It was really, truly crazy.
All right. And so that's Roland Fryer being interviewed by the Free Press. And guys, again, I talked about this story years ago, so you should have been following me for a long time, is what I've been saying. But when he first came out with this report, all right, listen, here's what you have to understand. Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, what's the other one? Freddie Gray, all hoaxes. But they served an important point in time in history. Here's what happened. After Trayvon Martin, after Michael Brown, all right, after Freddie Gray, when you saw blacks being allowed to riot in the streets over a hoax, a lot of officers got really scared. And this actually hurt the black community more than help. I'm speaking of depolicing. I'm speaking of the defund the police movement. Before the defund the police movement, even with the Trayvon Martin hoax, with the Michael Brown hoax, with the Freddie Gray hoax, police officers started depolicing, meaning they were scared to go into certain neighborhoods and police criminals if they were black, because they didn't want to end up like the cops or like a George Zimmerman that was being charged and going through a trial for something that was obviously self-defense. I'm so sick and tired of people bashing George Zimmerman. I understand he went a little cray-cray, but I understand why he went cray-cray. He was a Democrat activist that literally, for a period of time in his life, George Zimmerman tutored black kids on how to read. I believe he was half Latino, half white. I met his family in studio. They were Democrats. I mean, solid Democrats. They couldn't believe what was happening. The narrative that was being said, even right here locally in Orlando. I remember watching television. I remember watching the news when they first broke the story about Trayvon Martin, and it was a white skinhead that had killed this young boy. They made it sound so bad that I seriously sat there and I said, "Oh my God!" I was a black conservative. I was a black conservative. And started delving into politics at this time, learning about the history of the Democrat Party and all the lies that they had been spewing and the gaslighting that even black liberal elites were doing to their fellow black citizens. It was absolutely insane. And then I saw this story and I was like, oh my God, do I have it wrong, Lord? Nah. They showed a picture of George Zimmerman and I was like, my exact words at the time, I said it out loud. I was so shocked. I was like, that fool ain't white. He's Mexican. But they had the narrative. They got the narrative. They got the narrative that they wanted. And the truth of the matter is, you heard Roland Fryer say, you know what the truth was, when we delve into it, blacks get roughed up. Oftentimes blacks will get roughed up. Let's be real, because other blacks are so busy telling them that the cops are bad, the cops are bad. There's a lot of resisting arrest instead of just complying. I've been stopped by cops several times. I've been arrested a couple of times. I always complied. It always went peaceful. I don't give anybody a reason, especially with a badge, to make them mad at me. Even if they're jerks. I'm not doing it. Live to fight another day. That's what I say. All right? So just absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. But you heard the man. Cops roughed up blacks, minorities. There seemed to be more. But when it came to shooting blacks, white men did not want to go to jail because they didn't want the narrative put on them that they shot a black person. Therefore, they shot blacks less. They shot fewer blacks than they did whites. White men are killed by cops more than blacks. You'll never hear this in mainstream media. All right. Let's move on. This is Ann Coulter schooling Bill Maher and Van Jones, although Bill Maher always has to be sarcastic, even when he's wrong, to try to make a quick hit. But he knows, and I think the audience knows, and Van Jones certainly knows, that what Ann Coulter says about this is true. This is regarding the Kansas City shooting and the murderers that murdered at least one Kansas City lady and injured several others as a result of a gang battle, apparently, that was happening during the at the end of the parade route or whatever it was. All right, so let's go ahead and roll this. This is Ann Coulter and Van Jones on Bill Maher's program.
I mean, we don't know who did this shooting, by the way, the Super Bowl shooting.
We have some idea.
What?
If it were a white man shooting, we'd know.
Well, we don't know. But they haven't.
That's how we know it's not a white man. I can tell you that much.
Do you think they were repressing that reporting?
They wouldn't tell us about the transgender woman that shot up the Christian school for what, like a year? San Bernardino out here. Remember the crazy terrorist Muslims? That's when I first noticed, they're not telling us who it is. It's not a white male. The longer they go without telling you, it's not a white male.
Okay, well, for this one, for right now, as of Friday night, February 16th.
We know.
We don't officially know. Okay, you have special powers.
And you notice the audience clapping like seals. These are people that won't do research. I appreciate Bill Maher because during the COVID lockdowns, it became clear that he's a true liberal that loves America and not necessarily the commies in his party. But still, he's a liberal. He's got to stay in good with the crowd. And so he's always going to say some things and do some things that, listen, undoubtedly he believes many. But sometimes I wonder if he's just playing to the crowd like he just did there. You and I know this is true. If it's a white shooter, then automatically, as soon as it's a white shooting, the media will not hesitate to report. Why? Because they want that narrative that guns have to be, AR-15s, all this kind of stuff. It has to be, we have to stop this. We have to ban assault rifles. You'll hear them say all this type of nonsense. But if it's a crime, if it's criminals, if it's black thugs, and you got the Kansas City mayor coming out and saying that thugs is a dog, it's a dog whistle that the governor of Kansas, the governor of Missouri is using to describe this crime. No, it's not a dog whistle, fool. It's a fact. It's a fact. You guys know it to be true. If it's a white dude that does the shooting, you're going to know about it quick, fast, and in a hurry. If it's a trans, if it's a black, if it's anyone or any group of people that predominantly vote for the left, they're not going to give you a description. You know that's true because they are out for a narrative. If they weren't out for the narrative, they tell you the truth. Guys, you better be armed because the truth of the matter is you have so many gun defenses, good gun defenses every day. It is absolutely insane. So the best thing for you is to be armed, to protect yourself. And even though the Second Amendment is for guarding against a tyrannical government, the facts bear the truth. Over 2 million gun defenses every single year in the United States of America by a good guy with a gun. If they shared those stories on a daily basis, you'd know they're lying. You would know the left is lying. And you would have to ask yourself the question, why do they want me to be disarmed? As my friend Mark Walters of Armed American Radio often says. All right, guys, this podcast is going longer than I expected, but I do want to get to this real quick. I want to make the argument for both George Washington and for Abraham Lincoln as the best president, and why it shouldn't be President's Day, why it should be why we should just celebrate Abraham Lincoln's birthday and George Washington's birthday. I do want to share this. Texas Governor Greg Abbott announces new military base near the southern border. So Governor Greg Abbott announced plans to build a military base camp near El Paso, Texas, while responding to Joe Biden's ongoing immigration crisis. The military base will house National Guard troops tasked with the sole responsibility of keeping the southern border secure and free from illegal migrants across into the U.S. Abbott announced this on Friday that the camp will be built on 80 acres of land in Eagle Pass and hold up to 1,800 Texas National Guard members. It will also have a room to house an additional 500 members in an effort to keep the border security on lockdown. The governor said the first 300 beds should be ready by April, promising not to reduce Texas resources on the border anytime soon. Now, I think this is a great idea. I think Governor Greg Abbott has played a lot of political theater in the past, frankly, but I think he's been pretty good when it comes to the border. I think he and Governor Ron DeSantis did a good job of making sure that the border issue stayed front and center, even when Trump wasn't in office. By sending illegals to different states, a lot of other governors tried to glom on, including Kristi Noem. It's one of the reasons why she annoys the crap out of me now, trying to pretend like she was, all against COVID and stuff like that. Her state fared well simply because her legislature went against her when it came to COVID lockdowns. I didn't realize that at first. I didn't know that at first. I was all in for Kristi Noem until I found out that, and I'm like, oh, what a phony. All right, and I'm so tired of being gaslit by Republicans. I just can't take it. I cannot take it. I won't stand for it. I know a lot of you, oh, we got to vote for it. Nah, I can't do it, man. I can't vote for fakes. I can't vote for people that gaslight me. I just won't do it. Carl, screw you. You're going to destroy it. No, you're going to destroy the country, fool, by voting for rhinos. They're just as bad as the left, as far as I'm concerned. You get the same result in the end. All right. So anyway, let me just say this real quickly. All right. Or go through this real quickly. Again, please be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you go to get your podcast. Please go to mypillow.com, 10-year warranty, 60-day money-back guarantee on all MyPillow products. Use the promo code Carl, C-A-R-L. All right, get yourself a good night's rest with many of their products. MyPillow 2.0, Giza Dream Sheets. They got mattress toppers. They got robes. They got they've got footwear. They've even got dog beds. You name it, mypillow.com. All right, so this is from History, the History Channel, history.com, the case for George Washington. And this is an oversimplified summation, but I think it's I think it's a good one. So I'm just going to read through this real quick, pretty much verbatim, and just offer my takes as we prepare to end today's show. And for those of you that are listening, please make sure you tune in tonight. I will be in for the Officer Tatum, so you have that to look forward to. We'll cover this stuff and more, but even more in depth and with some of your calls, hopefully. All right, so now here's the title from the History Channel or history.com. History Face Off. Who was the greatest president, Washington or Lincoln? Now, I believe that Washington is the greatest although I appreciate the arguments that are made in this column. We'll go through them quickly. So George Washington was not just, this is the case for George Washington being the best, all right, being the greatest president ever. So the article states, George Washington was not just first in war, first in peace, and first in the hearts of his countrymen, quote unquote, as he was eulogized by Henry Lee, but first among America's chief executives in the minds of many presidential scholars, including Pulitzer Prize-winning historian Joseph Ellis. All right, after leading the Continental Army to an improbable victory over the world's most powerful empire, Washington faced another daunting challenge to transform ink on parchment into the actuality of the American presidency. Guys, do you understand how significant that is? In thousands of years of mankind, human history, no one, no country had ever inked a constitution that gave the people more power than the elites. No one had ever done it. Ever. This is why I get so mad with these woke social justice warriors. Yes, it is a fair criticism to talk about our nation's history, but it is unfair to talk about our nation's history while excluding world history. All right. So he goes on, and I quote, "The power of the modern presidency is not defined by the Constitution. It's defined by the Washington presidency." What a great line. And that could not be more true. All right. His Excellency, this is according to Ellis, Joseph Ellis, the historian. He says here regarding George Washington, His Excellency George Washington, if you read the Constitution of the U.S. on the executive branch and the power of the presidency, it's extremely vague. And the ghost hovering over the entire Constitutional Convention is fear of monarchy. Washington makes real and palpable what is vague in the Constitution. He makes the office of president both prime minister and king. He gives it its executive power. He creates the idea of a cabinet, which didn't exist in the Constitution, so that people could, he was humble enough to ask for advice, which didn't exist in the Constitution. He defines the primary role of the executive branch in the making of foreign policy. Ellis says here, the historian, quote, "Washington has the incalculable advantage of being first. That can't simply be dismissed. Lincoln saved the republic that Washington created. Lincoln's tremendous act of leadership is dependent completely upon the existence of a stable, enduring republic that would not have come into existence if the founding fathers and Washington, the foundingest father of all, hadn't created it. Everything Lincoln does wouldn't have happened if Washington wasn't the leader he was," close quote. And I believe that wholeheartedly. As great as Abraham Lincoln was, he didn't set the blueprint. He followed it. Now, granted, his convictions were strong, and he's amazing, and he should be celebrated. Washington is the greatest, Lincoln a close second. A lesser man might have, the historian argues, might have been consumed by power and reigned like a monarch. But Washington would never be a King George. He didn't even want to be president in the first place. No president, Ellis writes, in American history didn't want to be president more than George Washington didn't want to be president. Man, he knew no person could enter and exit the office with the same level of reputation. He tried to quit after his first term, but was told the republic couldn't survive without him, close quote. Tried to quit after his first term. The man had more power than any of us could fathom, and he tried to quit. In spite of pleas to remain in office, Washington stepped aside after 2 terms with a memorable goodbye to the American people. And he says, quote, the historian does, "The big thing with Washington's farewell address wasn't the address, but the farewell." Wow, people think they can't exist without him. Think about that. In that time, that was their first president. How could the country survive, they thought, without him? He is the closest thing to an indispensable figure in American history, and yet, by exiting, he sends the signal that no person in the republic is indispensable. Everyone is disposable. Man, you have to understand the context of history. Washington, of course, wasn't immune from America's original sin. His wealth was built upon the backs of hundreds of slaves who lived in Mount Vernon, although Ellis notes that the first president and the only one of the founding fathers from Virginia to free his slaves upon his death. Oh, he was a slaveholder, so he has no wisdom to share. You guys are freaking morons. The people that believe that are just morons. They don't consider how many Africans were slave traders, were slave owners. How many Indians? The same. Slavery was universal. It existed everywhere. What's important is we ended it right here in America. The historian goes on to write, Washington knows that if you start to argue about slavery in the early years, it would have destroyed the republic. He believes the time to debate is 1808, when the slave trade ends, quote unquote. Ellis says that Washington, as the commander of the Continental Army, brought a stature to the presidency, that no one could ever match. He's the only president elected unanimously both times. He's the one founder who is a legend in his own time, and not just after. That is so true. All of the things that he did before, when you read the stories of the miracles of George Washington during some of the battles that he led, every one of the other prominent founders agree that he is in a separate category among the founders. He gets all the big things right. His judgment is impeccable. He brings a level of popular support that is impossible for any subsequent American leader to ever have. Now, quickly, here's the case for Abraham Lincoln, the first Republican president. When Abraham Lincoln took the oath of office 72 years after Washington, he confronted the greatest crisis in American history, with a nation torn in two. Harold Holzer, director of the Roosevelt House Public Policy Institute. Now, so I think what you're getting is I think you're getting kind of a conservative and liberal bent here, even though they won't admit to it. But I give this guy props for praising Lincoln. Director of the Roosevelt House Public Policy Institute at Hunter College says that Lincoln's work to preserve the Union that Washington helped to create is part of what made him the country's greatest president. He said, quote, saving the Union, which would have ended the American experience, and eradicating the sinful hypocrisy of slavery gives him the edge. All right. He says, plus, he died for his nation's sins. He was the last victim of the violence necessary to secure the bond between the states. That makes him all the more heroic. Great argument. He still didn't create the blueprint. And I'm convinced that if Washington and Lincoln switched time periods, Washington would have done what Lincoln did. I don't know. None of us know truly. All right. But I don't know that Lincoln would have been the right man at the right time for the founding, because Washington laid the foundation to which Abraham Lincoln was able to look at the blueprint and say, how do we get back here? Whereas Washington said, this is where we are. This is what we will do. This is who we will be. And he set in motion the abolishment of slavery. And set in place the American dream, in my opinion. Holzer says that part of what made Lincoln the country's greatest president is that he embodied the American dream. Unlike a wealthy slave-holding plantation owner such as Washington, Lincoln was born into poverty. He was not part of the historian says, he was not, and I'm quoting, he was not part of the American elite. He wasn't a military hero. He rose from obscurity to prove that anyone could make it in America. Now, see, to me, this is a social justice warrior argument from a historian who's undoubtedly good in making the case. Now, I could be wrong on that, all right? I'm not trying to knock the guy, because obviously he's done extensive research and he's well-versed and he knows what he talks about. But when I think about it in this context, when he says, unlike a wealthy slave-holding plantation owner, to me, that makes the case for Washington. Because Washington says, despite having all these things, despite having all this power, I'm ready to die for this Constitution, and I'm ready to give it all up. I'm ready to give it all up. So that, not just the elites, which he was a soldier, all right? So not just the elites can prosper, so that every American can prosper. I think this guy actually makes the case for Lincoln while he was trying to make the case for Washington, being the greatest president, while he was trying to make the case for Lincoln being the greatest president. Lincoln was also the greatest writer among the presidents. Tolstoy, Stoll, and Whitman all believed it. says Holzer, who has authored, co-authored, or edited more than 50 books himself. The Gettysburg Address and Lincoln's second inaugural address are amongst the most iconic texts in the country's history. His words are American gospel, the historian writes. For all of his totem-like dignity, Washington was not a memorable phrase maker. He inspired by leading by example. Lincoln, though, created almost a second Declaration of Independence in his prose. Lincoln's 6'4" frame added to his aura, Holzer says. In a way, he was almost mythologically admirable because of his physical attributes. He was one big guy. He's still the tallest president we've ever had. People took to him because, like Washington, he was much bigger than his contemporaries and capable of physical feats, which made him admired by men who were the voters. Everyone knows that Lincoln was amusing and retold jokes. He was also a lightning rod for people's anxieties. And by having a sense of humor, he helped the country endure. He's almost a symbol of national endurance by extra strength and humor. All right, Holzer says Lincoln also had the skills to deal with a partisan environment that didn't exist during Washington's presidency. I think Lincoln was very adaptable. I don't think Washington was. Washington did not have to operate much in the political sphere. He was contemptuous of party politics. When newspapers started attacking him in the middle of his second term, he didn't want to deal with it. He would not have been able to thrive in the next century, but the timing was right for both men. He's right that the timing was right for both men. And by the way, how's that party system working out? Now, I personally believe in the party system. I know this is going to sound contradictory because I still believe it's the best system worldwide, but I understand Washington's grief with the party system because you always have a binary choice. You always assume that your party is better than the other party instead of looking at policies. It's the one thing that drives me nuts, even though I vote Republican. All right. One of the most common speculative questions in American history is how Lincoln, had he lived, would have handled the contentious process of Reconstruction differently from his successor, Andrew Johnson. All right. He says, I think Lincoln would have been savvy enough to negotiate more ingeniously than Johnson. Well, Johnson was a racist. All right. So, yeah, he would have been. He couldn't have done any worse. Had Lincoln been around for the 1860s, he says we might not have needed a second civil rights movement in the 1960s to fulfill that unkept promise. Lincoln has his share of critics, some whom blame him for moving too impetuously and starting the Civil War and suspending habeas corpus. Others who fought him for moving too slowly and abolishing slavery. He's still the one, though, who did more than anyone else to end slavery. He owns emancipation because he's the one who did it and suffered through the decision. He paid a huge political price for what we think was lethargy and reluctance. He was, in fact, a liberator. Frankly, so was George Washington. You have no United States of America if the first president didn't believe in the Constitution. It's that simple. Guys, I appreciate you tuning in to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Until next time, do not grow weary doing good. God bless you.